carefully to the information presented. Some of it may seem alarming, but these are trends, and the beauty of trends is that they can be altered by our own actions. So we ask you to act now and share this information with others. Please get involved and visit our website for all the handouts and how you can take the next step. To learn more about the information presented at the Economic Summit, visit the Cape Cod Chamber website at ecapechamber.com and click on our resource directory. Get involved in your town's financial well-being and share this information with others. The economic health of our children's future is at stake.
What I would like to say on a positive note is that the demographics here also bring us good news. It is this population of frequently affluent retirees, seasonal many times, people who, if we can get to them, will many times support the health system in a philanthropic way, partly to make sure that there's a good healthcare system, and should they need an ambulance trip to the hospital, good emergency care, and so on, even though the bulk of their care may be in Boston or New York. But what we find is, if they've had a good experience, if they feel we've got a quality system, if it's one they can trust, they then, if they have the means, are very open to giving generously to help the overall community. And that's been the real difference maker here on Cape Cod. Very tough to earn a margin delivering health care to a Medicare population on Cape Cod, I can tell you. But that philanthropy is what's made the difference in our ability to build infrastructure, add technology, and these days we're even getting gifts that support information technology and our recruitment challenges of doctors. Incidentally, we now employ about 140 physicians out of 450 on the Cape. And we do that because we can't get them here otherwise. That's an additional burden, and at the moment, there's no additional revenue to cover that. We do have a visit coming up with Senator Kennedy's office. We're going to have to get some of this better understood, because it really is a challenge we want to meet, but it's a tough one. But that philanthropic difference, again, because of this wonderful demographic here, has been just a godsend. It's really made a difference. And then my final comment is I wanted to kind of tag on to Tony. You I think, made a good point about our political structure here in the Cape, and others have as well. I grew up in Massachusetts, lived here, and then moved and worked for a lot of years in the Midwest. When I grew up, I always understood that New Englanders were by nature tight, thrifty, but they also, one of our neighboring states has the slogan, live free or die. And the conflict of that lives and breathes here in the Cape, doesn't it? In the Midwest, they come to regionalization easily. County government means something. It has some force. It brings people together. And quite frankly, people are very interested in saving money. Here, the value of independence seems to outweigh the need to save money. And I sometimes wonder if it's, are we missing some facts and information? I mean, would we know if we consolidated the school systems into 3 or 1, or police department, or fire department, or libraries, what the savings would be? And if we did, maybe there have been studies there. I'm not sure. I've seen some. Maybe they have, maybe they're not. But if someone could produce real numbers on that, would it, in fact, move us to doing some things that we all know are really hard to do? And final comment, I'm very, very proud as I look back at the leadership, particularly in the towns of Falmouth and Hyannis, the boards of Falmouth Hospital, Cape Cod Hospital, the VNA, who had the vision and the foresight to bring us together into a consolidated healthcare system. Partly because I think there was a necessity to do that, and they saw a future that looked pretty grim if we didn't. But I got to tell you, there were 120 board members, 120, who valued their seat, who valued the organization that they supported and governed, and many of them gave that up. We now have 17. So we went from 120 board seats, and most of you have been on boards, you know what that means and how invested you get, down to 17 for the greater good. If we could do that in something as complicated and controversial as healthcare, couldn't we do that in some of these other areas? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We have some time for questions, so as people want to just file up the microphone in the middle, that would be good. I know Bill has a thought about adding some comments.
I'd like to add Matt Lee, who's the head of our workforce and board at the Chamber, to talk just a few moments on some immigration issues that affect all of us.
If Matt could do that, that would be great. And then I've got a couple of questions from the panel, and we'll move on from there.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. I don't think we can have this debate without talking about immigration. I'm going to be very quick, I promise everyone. But if we can't talk for 6 hours and not talk about immigration for 5 to 10 minutes. I'm an immigration lawyer, but I'm an immigrant. 5 minutes. I'm an immigrant, but I'm also a very conservative Republican. I was a prosecutor. I tell you this because I was a prosecutor kicking people out of the country. I'm a small business owner. I have voted Republican for 25 years. Maybe not ever again, but I have. But I have to say this. We as Americans have to stop beating up immigrants. They are not our problem. They are not our problem. They're the solution, or part of the solution to our problem. How is it that Massachusetts, that loses 10,000 people a month, Cape Cod that loses thousands of people a year, how is it that we haven't just shut down? How is it that we participated in the technology boom of the 1990s and that we can operate hotels and restaurants every single summer? It's because we bring in foreign professional workers to the state in incredible numbers. We bring 5,000 H-2B seasonal workers legally to the Cape Cod every single year, another 2,000 to 3,000 foreign, J-1 foreign students to work, who's not supposed to be a workforce, but we bring them here to work. We have these immigrants are the future of this country. Before we decide which camp we want to be in, the anti-immigration camp or the immigration camp, understand that there's not one economic argument to support anti-immigration. I was on a national radio station debating the John D. Rockefeller economist at Dartmouth University. He's on the President's Economic Council. He could have wiped my behind with economic arguments. He didn't make one economic argument for an hour. I made all the economic arguments, a lawyer. And it dawned on me when I got home why he didn't make an economic argument. Because there's not one economic argument out there to support anti-immigration. At the end of the day, we need to really evaluate before which tent we go in what our background is. My wife's family came here 350 years ago on the Mayflower. I came here on Pan Am. Okay? Is there anyone in this room that's 100% Native American? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Whoa, look at them lined up.
I'm hoping that we don't have to find ourselves in one camp or another when it comes to immigration, that maybe we can find ourselves in the same camp and develop a way to make immigration actually work in this country, because we know it's broken right now. There's no question about it. So I don't think you have to be anti-immigration or pro-immigration. You can be both and do it in a smart way. Peter, you have a comment to this.
Yeah. Thank you. Immigration is one of these emotional demographic issues which unfortunately does not lend itself well to reasonable dialogue. And that's why I admire the Canadians so much, and they do it so well. But it seems to me that if we want to look at a country that has totally botched their immigration issues, look at France. And look at all the problems that have caused in France by ghettoizing and discriminating against and really demonizing immigrants. Right. And quite frankly, I'm ashamed at our government the way it rounds up working people in factories and mothers and so forth and ships them off as they did from New Bedford. That is no sensible immigration policy whatsoever. That's simply shameful.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. and it is an emotional topic. Let's move on to some other thoughts for the moment. We have some questions queued up here. Fire away.
It's turned on. It strikes me that the elephant in the room and underlying cause of much of the trouble we're talking about is the archaic and fragmented structure of local government. That said, at least my confidence is not very high that local government is going to change itself. I guess my question would be, where does the leadership come from to educate the population, good point on the statistics, I think, that we are not getting our money's worth, number one, and the structure is highly resistant to change and fundamentally is the cause of much of our problem.
A very good question. I don't know if anybody wants to take a swipe at that. I know I see Warren Rutherford in the back there, probably going to comment on that in just a moment. Anybody care to take a cut at that, or stow it away for a moment?
Where's the leadership coming from? Is that essentially the question? Personally, I think
exactly.
It has to come from the business community. I think that's why there are 300 plus people here today. And that's got to be the driver behind the conversation. That's got to be the driver to the people who are in public government, the selectmen, the planning board, zoning board, so forth. We're not hearing that. They're not hearing that voice strongly enough. But with 330 people who are ambassadors now here in this room, and all go out and spread out over the 15 towns, I think we can actually effectuate a lot of change.
Somebody had mentioned this morning that a session by Peter should be mandatory for anybody that serves on a town board, for example, which would be a good starting perspective.
Yes.
What don't you think, Doug?
There are two things I don't understand. One, I don't understand how you can be a conservative Republican and pro-immigration, but I'm going to let that one be answered later. It is true. You know, why it's sort of shocking, but why aren't planning boards predominantly lay people? It's a brutal job. There's no question. But how do we set up a structure where those who are making critical land use decisions that are 50 and 100 plus year decisions are people with virtually no or none background in basic planning, land use planning principles. I find it absolutely shocking. I don't think anybody should serve on a zoning board or a planning board unless they have an advanced degree or they have 80 hours of continuing education in land use planning. And everybody looks at me and says, "What are you, stupid?" And you know, maybe I am. But the difficulty is, you know, how would you get all of these boards to be filled with people who are willing to go through that type of continuing education? But I think it's a critical aspect of the failings that we're addressing this morning.
Thank you. Bill has a comment.
If you look at the list of collaborators that the committee for this organization, for our economic summit, put together, if that list of collaborators continues into the future and we get something beyond today, if they participate in other ways in joining some of the committees we're looking at, I think we'll go somewhere. We've got business roundtables, realtors, the builders. That's the group. That's the group that's going to do something.
That the Chamber of Commerce is probably as good as any to pick up the cudgel and lead here, and it strikes me as being a much more beneficial and productive effort than, you know, studying how many tourists cross the bridge on any given day during the summer.
It's a good point. I know Wendy is going to close out our session before lunch, and maybe we'll make a comment on that.
We do more than that,
Thank you.
By the way.
Our next question.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Rue, and I'm the Executive Director of Hosteling International American Youth Hostels. So we've been operating on hostels on Cape Cod for many more years than I've been alive. But and I just wanted to say I'm the veteran of some of those zoning issues as we've gone through permitting and issues in both both towns of Eastham and Barnstable for creating new facilities and renovating old ones. But my question today really is about the changing nature of tourism, and asking Bill and maybe others to comment on kind of the trickle-down effect and what it really has meant when you've seen motels condoized, inns reverted back to single-family use. So the accessibility to the Cape is changing on who comes and how they spend their money, and really what does that mean for the business community, and both in recent past and projecting forward what that means. Thank
As
you.
I said earlier, all this is intertwined, and one of the things that we're seeing is the fact that the hotels are down to basically 3-day stays. Occupancy on Cape Cod is, I believe, somewhere around 50% year-round. But what's occurring is the baby boomers who are renting their houses out, and you'll find that people are going to those houses. That's one thing, I think. But yes, it does have a negative effect on the fact that hotel rooms aren't here. And we need to build more. If you're going to do it, you're not going to be able to do that.
Thank you. Melinda, next question.
Well, first of all, I'm going to be part of that workforce that's working until they wheel her into the funeral home. I'm going to be working forever, and those people, some people here know me, know that I do many things. My question to each one of you is, and probably to Wendy as well, here we are, we're all here, and we're all talking about this, and we've opened up the Pandora's box, so to speak, and it's out there. We've talked about it. We've got serious issues, and one is regionalization, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need to repeat them all. But I would like to ask each one of the panelists if they could tell us, okay, what's the first step? Because, you know, going out into our communities, I can go back to my town of Sandwich and talk until I'm blue in the face, and they're not going to pay any attention to me, and those selectmen are going to sit up there, great people, they're volunteers. We're not talking, that's the other problem. We have volunteer government, which is not the way you should do government, I've decided. And they're going to sit up there and look at me and say, yes, very nice, thank you very much, Mrs. Gallant, if you'll sit down. And that's what we'll get. So my question is, what's the first step to make it happen, to make something happen? Because we all know there's a business roundtable on Cape Cod, fabulous. 92, there's 15 chambers of commerce, there's 1,183 nonprofits. So how do we bring us all together? And I work for a nonprofit now. So how do we bring us all together and say, okay, this is the first step. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, that's the big question, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Exactly. So what's the answer?
Yeah.
Mac, I'm sorry. What are you saying? Put your.
Is create that map for next steps. So if you're interested in participating, show up, volunteer, put your name on the green piece of paper.
I'm going to take a 2-second answer to Melinda's question, and which is a very good one, because we've been talking about the issues. Obviously, Wendy's going to say, well, these are the next steps that we have to take, because it doesn't do any good for us to come here together with 300 people unless we positively articulate what the next steps are. The simple answer that I have for Melinda is change the economic profile. You said, Peter, no taxation. I say tax the bejesus out of sprawl and create an economic incentive for smart growth, and you solve 99% of the problems on Cape Cod.
Thank you. Maggie, you have a microphone.
In the nonprofit sector, Steve gave the example of the hospitals consolidating. And Lisa Bergenrother, in her capacity as executive director at the Arts Foundation, looks for best practices, looks for collaborations. When we provide grants to artists and arts organizations, we support those that are collaborative and those that reduce those inefficiencies. So how do you make that long journey? For us, it's we make it one step at a time. And you see the nonprofit sector, whenever possible, working to have those efficiencies because they don't have enough money to do it any other way. And certainly in the arts and the cultural community, there's tremendous opportunity for additional improvement in this arena. But I think we should be very excited and use as best practices those that have already been successful.
Thank you, Maggie. Steve.
Yeah, if I lived in Truro or someplace with a declining school enrollment, Provincetown I know is significant, and I saw my property taxes or whatever go up, spiral up significantly, and I was given a choice of either paying that or moving out, or seeing an alternative that said through school consolidation I not only could avoid that extra tax, but I might even save some money. if somebody could ever present that to me, we're all thoughtful people, it might change the way I vote, it might change the kind of pressure I'd put on my elected representatives. Now, who provides that information is an interesting question. Who's got the funds to support the economic analysis or so on? I'm not real sure. Could it be a Cape Cod Chamber function? Might be. It might be some other amalgam of government officials and business and so on. Those are always tough to be done. But I think most people are concerned enough about it that how they elect people and what they expect of their elected officials, rather than doing it all alone, might significantly change. Might change if armed with the information.
I want to pick up Peter's point and Doug's point. A couple weeks ago, there were 10,000 registered voters in the town of Mashpee, and the agenda for that evening were a number of zoning articles. 127 people showed up.
133.
Oh, excuse me, 133. Okay. That's incredible. So yeah, the folks just don't care.
So you got to
they're watching the Red Sox. I mean, it's just incredible. Yeah. They won't. They need to get involved somehow. That's Peter's paper, perhaps. It's the collaborative group we've had. We've tried to do a lot of public relations things with wastewater. The Business Roundtable has tried to do things with housing. Housing Assistance Corporation has rolled out a housing summit. It's just involvement, I suppose, and evolve over time.
These are complicated issues. If we were to maybe just boil them down, I mean, Peter says we need demographic diversity on the Cape, and I think we can all agree with that. So how do you get demographic diversity? Well, we need some diversity in our housing choices, and we absolutely need that. And how do we get that? Well, that'll only happen through zoning changes. So we need some zoning changes. But how are we going to get zoning changes? You know, we need to be able to handle wastewater issues on the Cape. You know, it gets back to the infrastructure, and that's probably one of the big deals, right? I mean, you've got sewers in Hyannis, and you can work toward that. But what about the rest of the Cape? You know, that's a big problem. So what's next? I mean, Wendy's going to, get a group together to keep this moving forward. But certainly zoning and wastewater, I think, are a couple of the key issues in order to find a diverse demography here on the Cape. Peter?
I would just make the point that if you can make 30,000 people or the 200,000 adults that live in the Cape aware that their economic survival and the future value of their homes depends on solving these problems, then maybe we'll get more than 133 people out to the next meeting.
Right.
Because that's the key. It's your economic survival that matters. The Cape Cod Times, as well as other corporations and organizations.
And when you frame it that way, it gets people's attention. Two more questions. Stu?
Yeah. I'm Stu Bornstein, and I probably encompass all these problems in one way or other one of my businesses. We employ over 400 people, and nobody has addressed job creation. And job creation is the key. We yell about affordable housing. We have plenty of housing. It's affordable, not to the shopkeeper, not to the waiter, but we don't bring in the people that can afford these houses because there's no jobs for them. And until we change some of the things that are important in the way we want to bring businesses down here, you're not going to bring any down here. Somebody wants something bigger than a 10,000-foot building, he's got a lot of hurdles to go through. Guess what? There's all kinds of cities and towns that welcome this with open arms without putting hurdles in front of it, adding $25 a foot to the cost of doing it. We're worried about getting all this information about what we have to do. We got a Cape Cod Commission. Let's turn them loose to gather up all this information we need. And maybe by getting rid of some of these 11,000 workers that work for all these towns, we can take that money and start building sewer systems and don't have to worry about our water. I mean, we've got everything in backwards around here. I got a lot of issues. I can take pot shots at a lot of people, but this isn't the place to do it. I have been in front of boards about 400 times. Probably seen me more on TV than watching Dan Rather at night. I'm in front of towns twice a week trying to get things done. And Doug, you're my new hero. I have to tell you, you've hit everything on the head. And believe me, there's so much. We go in front of a zoning board, or a planning board, and there's usually 5 or 6 people, and there's 2 people that are really tuned in to what's going on, and the others aren't tuned in, and we're making the major decisions, and we're just not getting through. And we need more professional people to sit on these boards that really know what's going on in town to help the towns, and we're not getting it. Thank you.
Points very well taken. Thank you. Warren Rutherford, privilege of the last question.
Thank you. Well, it's comments and questions, Peter, and thank you for asking me to talk on something I wasn't prepared to. We talked previously about our aging workforce and our aging population and the demographics very well, and we have a vibrant wealth and health industry on the Cape, and I hope everyone appreciates here, and there's a growing number of young people who are coming to the Cape to service the older population in the wealth and the health industries. And they're going to be able to afford living here over time. But if you look at any of the financial advisory firms, who are they recruiting? They're recruiting young, educated people from off-Cape to come live here and service us in our golden years. Well, one of the things that Stu talked about was job creation. Guess what? And I may have missed it because I have a habit of not being able to sit for too long, for those of you who know me. But business recruitment. For those of you who don't remember, back from 90 to 97, I did manage this town, and with John O'Brien when he was with the Cape Cod County Economic Development Organization, we did an awful lot of business recruitment activity. I don't see that coordinated on a regional basis. I don't see that being done on a local basis, pretty much left to our own devices. But just consider, we do know the occupations in demand in this intellectual economy. This young lady sitting next to me, Elizabeth Harris-Moritz, runs an HR outsourcing outfit. She does a ton of recruitment for businesses on the Cape, and there's a ton of demographic and economic data on what occupations and what industries are in demand. We also know how to compete here on Cape Cod in the intellectual economy that Peter talked about. And we have done extremely well with our children, as our parents did with us, in educating our children so they can work in those occupations in demand in our intellectual economy. We have done a poor job of coordinating a regional and local approach to business growth in these industries. It's happening, but it's happening sporadically. It's not coordinated. And I just ask a question: can we include business recruitment in the demand industry economies in our follow-up steps? And maybe then our children that we're educating and moving off Cape will decide to stay here beyond 2 or 3 industries that is in demand, wealth and health. And it's just remarkable to me that every young person I do talk to that I have interaction with, and I have a lot of interaction with them, indicates to me they love the Cape, but now that they're educated, they can't work here. The jobs are not here. So from a regional approach, from a town approach, I'll move into what you suggested I talk on, Peter. We have never had, in the history of this state anyway, a regional focus. You know, if for those of you who know me, you know I'm a student of federal and state government and local government. And our state constitution was written prior to the federal constitution by Sam Adams, and was written with the idea of local control. And then came regional, and then came state. So our 300 glorious little cities and towns, many of them, Peter, out in the Berkshires, that have maybe 500 people in them, that can't support themselves, that's the hallmark of our history. So try to change that, and you've got a challenge. Regional government was consciously put together to be the way it is now, weak. In many of the regions in our state, the counties have essentially been dissolved, except on Cape Cod and a few out in the Pioneer Valley area. So we have an opportunity because we're an isolated peninsula. But the local 15 communities aren't really moving towards a regional approach for a couple of reasons. One, they like the authority. Two, Regional government has historically been in the past and continues to be very weak and not very visionary. And 3, on a local basis, and I know my good old friend Jim Merriam, who's the town administrator now in Harwich, who I've known for 25 years from my Canton days, we will tell you, and me after being out of town for over 10 years, you folks don't want the services to stop. You want the roads to be paved. You want the police, you want the fire, you want the schools, and the only way we can afford to provide that to you is through your property tax.
I guess the question is, from Peter's perspective, does our very survival depend on regionalization? And if it does, and if people embrace that, will we be then willing to sacrifice some of the services to make that happen? Good question. I don't know what the answer is.
Or the autonomy.
Or the autonomy, exactly. Because most of the people that I know on Cape Cod are pretty independent thinkers and very autonomous. And I would put myself in that group, and autonomy is a great thing. So how are we going to bring that together?
Peter, I have a response to another point from an earlier point.
We do need to wrap up, so
that's
just
what I'm going to do.
Very quickly.
The response was that what are we supposed to do next? And I will tell you, we have, I was reviewing the list of participants here. Tremendous cross-section of our economy on Cape Cod. I think all the business leaders, you ought to give yourselves a round of applause for being here. But the fact of the matter is, that group of people, and I would challenge, I think, the folks from Harwich are here. I saw Mary LeClaire. I think Matt Patrick stopped in. Maybe you need to convene this, Wendy, with all the so-called policymakers on the Cape, the planning boards and selectmen, and get them into a room and listen to what's going on, because they don't get it. I really believe they don't get it. They're, as you say, doing their own thing.
Thank you. And we're going to have to wrap up now.
To learn more about the information presented at the Economic Summit, visit the Cape Cod Chamber website at ecapechamber.com and click on our resource directory. Get involved in your town's financial well-being and share this information with others. The economic health of our children's future is at stake.